Okay, so let's take a quick look at Claude. This is the most recent interface as of yesterday. Again, if you've worked with Claude, you'll notice that like it has you restart and update it on a very regular basis. In fact, it feels like there are like daily pushes in terms of updates, and so they do a lot of interesting things. So if you look at the interface when you log in, you have a home option, which is going to be this screen here. So it's your sort of standard chat interface. And if you look down here, it now has two buttons enabled. So one is chat, so that's kind of a conversational interface. The second is going to be co-work. And if co-work is enabled, you're still interacting it via chat, but now you have the ability to designate a local file repository where you stick things. And I'll show you in just a minute how to get that set up. I want to put a few other things right here. So we also have an option for projects. We're going to work with projects throughout the course. Again, projects are just another sort of common consistent repository where you have access to information. It's got all of your historic chats and interactions. We'll talk a little bit about artifacts later on, but artifacts are, if you were to build a web app, for example, you have those things stored there. Okay, so this is our interface. One thing I do want to point out, and again, if you look at this little box over here, you have the ability to alter the model that Claude is working on. And so if you're on the Pro account at this point, Fable 5 was disabled within the Pro models as of a couple of days ago. But you're given options to really 4 different types of models. So there's Haiku, which is the fastest and cheapest model. So I guess maybe one thing to keep in mind is that with your subscription, you're throttled by usage. And so they define this with respect to the number of tokens you're using on it. So think of tokens as being sort of analogous to just the amount of compute you're using. So we have models that are like really simplistic, really fast, really cheap. So you can do a lot of compute in Claude, and we have models that are much more expensive. So Haiku is the fastest and cheapest. You can use it for high volume, really well-defined tasks like classification or extraction or tagging. If things are systematic and deterministic and really easy to replicate, Haiku is a great choice. Sonnet is really the balanced default. I would say Sonnet is the model that I tend to use the most if I'm working within this account. I would use it for everyday coding, for writing, for doing analysis, and most agentic work. And so it's kind of think of it as like the utility player. It requires a moderate amount of token usage. I think it's better than Haiku in most cases for things that require a little bit more thinking. Opus used to be kind of the premium tier of models within Claude. You would use it for planning, for heavy reasoning, for complex debugging. If you're developing architecture for a system, if you're doing dense analysis, or if you're doing think of like long horizon tasks where errors will compound as you move sequentially through steps. Opus is going to be the best thinking of those models. And so occasionally I would use Opus as a way of planning, and then I would use Sonnet or Haiku as a way of doing execution. If you can do really great planning, Haiku ends up being really effective for certain types of execution. So recently, Claude introduced a new class of models called Mythos. And if you've followed kind of the news around Claude, Mythos got a lot of press, and so they developed it, and then they immediately sort of like decided we're not going to release this to the public. They've got a bunch of test companies that are using it. There were some concerns about it being able to break through different security protocols, and so there were some risks associated with that. And so the Mythos class of models has not been publicly released yet, but there is a version of Mythos called Fable that Claude made accessible a few weeks ago. And so I've actually done a lot of work with Fable recently. It's very impressive. Unfortunately, they turned it off in the $20 a month Pro account as of this past weekend. And so you can only get access to it if you pay kind of out of pocket for either API or access or overage usage credits. Again, it's the model that I would think of as being really great for planning and architecting things. I would use it for like your hardest problems. That said, it uses a lot of compute. So the challenge with Fable is that if you were to run up a big task against Fable, you would burn through all of your usage credits within, an hour, and then you're throttled for like the next week or so. And so I'd say the guiding heuristic, I would say start with a a model that's maybe one tier lower than you think you need, and generate some output. If the quality holds up, well, then you can continue to work with that model. If it doesn't, then you need to increase the quality of the model. The gap between these tiers is going to be most visible on tasks that require sustained reasoning, and it's going to be the least visible on simple, well-scoped tasks. And so, for example, I've done work where I'm trying to create graphics in ggplot2, so like a statistical plot. Haiku is probably totally fine for that. I could use Opus or Fable, but that ends up being overkill. And so a challenge you face is really trying to balance the usage limits that you have based upon the account you're using with the work that you're trying to do. And so again, using maybe a better model for planning, and then a lower tier model for doing execution. I'd say for this course, I would recommend you use Sonnet for most of the tasks we're going to go engage in. I think that's going to be more than fine. We are maybe advantaged right now. Claude right now is offering double usage in Claude Code tasks. And so we have more access to compute than we would in times past. So I think if you were to set the default as being Sonnet, that should work for almost everything we're doing. And again, in the interface, you choose the model that you want to use by using this sort of drop down and selection. And I'll show that to you in just a second. Okay, quickly, I want to give you a brief overview of Claude Code. We're going to revisit this at the end of day 4. But what's important to keep in mind is that we are working with Claude Code through CoWork. It's just working on a local a file repository as opposed to maybe interacting with Git or GitHub or some sort of remote repository. When you do work with Claude Code, you're actually giving it access to more control over your computer. So you're giving it full shell access. It can execute any terminal command, including Git and Bash scripts and long-running jobs. It has a really nice Git and GitHub integration. So you can commit to GitHub, you can create branches, you can generate pull requests all through the chat interface. It's headless, which is to say it's server side. It can run on remote machines. You can run it within pipelines. You can access it through the same desktop app that we're going to use. And again, in the interface, one of the options is for Claude Code. And so if you do want to poke around with that, this is a nice place to start. I would say that as you move deeper into Claude Code, most people eventually end up working with it through the terminal. It just has some better functionality that direction. The reason why we're going to start with Claude CoWork for this is that we don't need access to a terminal or command line. That experience is not required. It's going to work on any computer, regardless of its operating system configuration. All of the exercises are going to be fully executable within CoWork, which is to say everything we're going to go through works in CoWork through the desktop app. It's going to produce the same research output as Claude Code because, again, it's running the same models. It's just doing it on a different file repository with a different set of permissions. And to be honest, it's going to be a little bit easier to follow in this live kind of remote seminar setting. So again, we're going to revisit Claude Code on day 4 if that's the direction you want to head. But for everything we're doing, CoWork is going to be great. And I would say in terms of my research pipeline, if I'm doing a lot of content or course development work, I really love CoWork because a lot of times I want those things to live on my machine. So if I'm generating PowerPoint slides or Excel examples, or I'm generating like Word documents, a lot of Microsoft Office products, I like to do those inside of CoWork. You could certainly do them inside of Code, but CoWork seems to be the place where I do that. So, and then for research, I've got a little bit different pipeline. So our first task is going to be building a research brief. So this is going to be a living document. It's going to live in context within our project. The Claude is going to read in every session. And we're going to start by just pasting that into project instructions. We could also create the brief and just have it as a persistent file within our folder. And it's going to define basically what is our research question. So a one crisp sentence that states what we're trying to learn, directional when that's possible. What's our theoretical frame? So the core mechanism we're drawing on, 2 to 3 sentences maximum for this. Data and settings. So what data do we have or what data do we plan to collect? The scope of that data and whatever the limitations are. Let's define key constructs. So variable names and definitions. So Claude will use consistent terminology. What's our target venue? So what's the journal? Who is the audience? This will help it shape writing style, methodological depth, and citation norms. That's important. And then status and next steps. So where do we live currently in the project? What are we going to try to work on today? We're going to try to define all of those things. Okay, so as an illustration, this could be a scoped research brief. So for our art choice conjoint study, the research question is, how does disclosed AI involvement in the creation of digital art affect consumer choice and willingness to pay? And do attitudes toward AI moderate the penalty? The theory is authenticity and essentialism, algorithm inversion. The mechanism is going to be the AI disclosure lowers perceived authenticity and creates effort. Favorable AI attitudes attenuate that a penalty. The data we're going to use is a choice-based conjoint. In this case, I'm going to assume I've already collected the data. So my N is 300. I've got 12 choice tasks with 3 alternatives per. So I've got 10,800 observations effectively. Here are my attributes. Here's what I've manipulated. Here's what I'm measuring about respondents. Here's the target venue. So I want it formatted for the Journal of Marketing Research. The methods it's going to use are a multinomial logit. It's going to use hierarchical Bayesian models. And the current status is the data set is cleaned. My next step is to specify the model with disclosure interacted by the AI attitude. Okay, so that would be an example of a research brief. And again, I think it's not a bad idea to create something like this that lives in perpetuity within your folder that you would update as you sequentially work through things, where it's updating basically the status of the project. And so in a GitHub repo, this would be defined as the README document that lives in your main kind of folder. And so it's one that basically defines the research brief. So what's the problem? What are you trying to solve? Who are your co-authors? What have you done? And creates a checklist of all of the things that you've done so far and the things that you plan on doing next, and defines the structure of the file repository. So let's start by first creating a new project within Claude. So um, um, we're gonna work with a skill in just a second to actually create formally that research brief. But to start with, what I'd like you to do, and I'll give you I'll walk you through this process using the example that I'm working on. And then I'm going to give you some time to actually work on this. So I'm going to use Claude to draft a short research brief. So I've already got access to that, and I'll show you how I got there in just a minute. I'm going to create a new project within Claude, and then I'm going to take that brief and I'm going to paste it into the project description. So let me pop over to Claude for a minute, and I'll actually do that. Okay. So I'm going to go into Claude. I'm going to go into this left-hand corner and click on New. And so this is going to take me into a new conversation. And two things I want to do. So I want to make sure I've set the model to the appropriate. So again, I'm going to recommend we use Sonnet for most of the work we're doing now. So I'll just set Sonnet as the default. That medium actually defines the thinking effort. And so again, even within Sonnet, if I really wanted to think hard about a problem, I could set it to Sonnet Max, and it's just going to engage in like a longer iterative like thinking refinement cycle. Again, the challenge is that if you put it on more thinking, it's going to consume more tokens, which is going to it's going to use basically your usage access a little bit faster. So in this context, I'm just going to define everything as the default. So Sonnet 5, medium thinking. And then I'm gonna click over here, and I'm gonna move over to cowork. Okay, and I want to okay, so cowork is enabled. So this might be the trick here, is that they used to be sort of a separate tab. Now cowork and chat live in the same location. But there are a couple of things I want to do here. So I want to start by creating a new project. But before I get there, I want to point it at a folder. So I'm gonna go into my file repository, and I'm gonna create a new folder. And this is, I'll call it just I'll call it AI art, whatever name you want, right? So and I'm going to point the project at AI art, and then whatever files are relevant, I'm going to start to stick into AI art as the location. So that ends up being like on disk. That's the local file repository. everything that lives in project is going to be like remotely hosted. And so both are persistent memory, but this is the one that I'm going to work on. So as we start to generate analysis code, it's gonna live in there. So this afternoon we're going to build a structure for like what how do we set this up basically so that we have the right folder structure, so that it's easy for Claude to get access to these things. But to start with, I just need a base folder. So I guess hopefully you can see this, right? So it might be a little bit small, but all I have right now is just I have like Finder open on my Mac, and I've created this new folder called AI art inside of Claude. I'm going to go in there, and now I'm going to create a new project, which is this option down here. So create new projects, and I'm going to call this one AI art as well. Okay, and then briefly, I'm going to give it an idea of like what am I working on? Working on a project to test the impact of AI generated art, or AI, let's say AI disclosed, generated and disclosed on consumer preference. Okay. Just a brief description of whatever it is you're trying to create. Okay, and I'll click on click project. The other thing I should have done, and I can do that here, is I want to basically define the folder that I'm going to work on. So it's AI art. I want to go in here, and that's my project. I want to choose a folder to add it to. Okay, I'm gonna pop over here. So I select the folder I started. And now what I've selected basically it shows me two things. So this is a project. So AI art is a project, and then AR art as a location. And then this button here tells me how I want Claude to react. And so I can have it automatically work, or I'm going to start by doing manual approvals on things. So before it takes any action on my machine, I'm going to ask it for me to approve those actions. Eventually, as you move through this process, you feel more comfortable with it, you can set it on auto. But I'd say to start with, let's just do it as manual. Okay.